So today I'm going to give you a chronological explanation on the timeline of this current conflict between Israel and Iran. As we speak right now, Israel is attacking and bombarding Iran, and the Iranians are responding. The US President Donald Trump is asking for an unconditional surrender from Iran. He's not even talking about a deal at this point. And to add on top of that, countries in the region are aiding Israel to attack Iran because they see Iran as a bigger enemy. Well, for different reasons, you can argue regional competition between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Turkey. They want Iran weakened, and you can argue sectarian reasons as well. Most of these other countries are Sunnis, and Iran is a Shia majority country. And the Saudis are adamant that no negotiations should go on with Iran. They want Iran completely destroyed. So it's not just about Israel per se, it's also about these countries, especially Saudi Arabia. Let's not forget that Syria opened their airspace to Israel to carry out these attacks against Iran. The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, during a press conference on Tuesday with the French President Emmanuel Macron, stated clearly that the mistake of 1938 should not be allowed to happen and described the Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei as the Schmittler of the Middle East. He described him as the mustache man of the Middle East. He said, "We will not repeat an agreement that was reached in 1938 that later led to the Second World War." Now, this is the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman speaking on Tuesday. And he did that with the French president, like I said, Emmanuel Macron, and referred to the Munich Agreement with the Nazi Germany under Schmittler at that time. And he was likening that to an attempt by America and by the Europeans to do a deal with the Iranians for Iran to proceed and continue with its nuclear program, or what they say, for civilian purposes. America is saying we don't want you to do that. Israel is saying we don't want you to do that because that would threaten us. But this is not only the Israelis saying it. I see a lot of people online, Syrians in particular, celebrating that Iran will now meet its match. And Syria opening their airspace to Israel to go and attack Iran. Let's talk about the Saudis. The Saudis took out the lives of between 3 to 600,000 Yemenis, starved them to extinction during the 7-year war waged on Yemen. Most of the terrorist groups you see in the Sahel in Africa today are funded directly by Saudi Arabia and their allies. Look at the war in Syria. Most of the foreign jihadists and fighters came in because Turkey, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates backed them up. The removal of Saddam Hussein, the Saudi Arabians opened up their airspace and allowed America to use their bases in Jeddah and other places in Saudi Arabia to target and remove Saddam. They have waged war against Iran. The Saudis continue to destabilize the region because you have a ruling family in place that wants to survive and will do anything and bend over backwards for the Americans and for the Israelis. So at this point in time, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, is making the argument that it is Iran's fault and describing the supreme leader of Iran as the Schmittler of the Middle East. Make this make sense to me. So again, this is the Sunnis hating on the Shia and translating that in real political actions, supporting Israel directly. And you saw it in the war in Syria. During the so-called civil war in Syria, some of the groups like the one led by Jolani, which they now call the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or the HTS, was I forgot the name of in a second. Most of these groups were largely supported by the Saudis and the Emiratis. Then there's another one called most of these groups basically, because I'm fading out at this point. It's really, really annoying at this point that people believe that Israel have the right to do what they are doing. And I'm not talking about Israel and America. I'm talking about Syria. I'm talking about countries like Saudi Arabia and the Emiratis that are openly sharing for Israel and clapping for them. Not just the government, the citizens, and you see them online. There's a bunch of Syrians on most of the social media platforms are celebrating, and they are saying that Iran is not democratic, that there's no democracy in Iran. Well, there's no democracy in Kuwait. in Bahrain, in Saudi Arabia, in the United Arab Emirates. But these countries have economic prosperity. So it's not about democracy in any sense. It's the fact that they're hiding their deep seated hatred towards the Alawis that were in power in Syria, towards the Shia in Iraq, and the Shia in Iran. So this is the deep seated hatred. It has nothing to do with being democratic or not. And the reality on the ground is that Israel is doing what it's doing today not because they are too strong, it's because those countries are collaborating with them and allowing this to happen. Well, let's look at our conversation and our discussion today is for us to look at a timeline, a chronological explanation on how this started. So, the topic of our conversation today is this decades of discord, the US Israel triangular standoff. So, we are going to look at it one by one. If you look at the history of Iran, starting from even during the Qajar dynasty and the reign of the Pahlavi, um, Iran had good relations with the West. In fact, up until 1979, when the revolution happened in Iran, the Shah, the biggest ally of America in the region was number one, Israel and Iran. They had good deals. And even though there was a fallout in the 50s between some elements within Iran after Mossadegh was removed from power when he tried to nationalize the Anglo-Iranian oil company, um, they put him in jail. I think he died in jail. But the relationship between the West and Iran have been very good, especially during that period. A lot of Americans and people from the West used to go to holiday in Iran. Some of them used to go to Bandar Abbas, which used to be Bandar Shah. It's on the coast, and they used to go on holidays there. Iran was the beautiful, amazing place where they used to go on holiday. And fast forward to 1979, after Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini came to power, and the student hostage crisis happened. Let's not forget that the revolution also brought about a lot of changes that were fundamental, and that affected the relationship between Iran and the United States. So basically, the root of the hostility traced back to 1979 when the US backed Shah was overthrown during Iran's Islamic Revolution. Ayatollah Khomeini took power and branded the US as the Great Satan and Israel as the Little Satan. Soon after, militants, the people they describe as militants, are actually students that stormed the US Embassy in Tehran and held 52 Americans hostage for a period of 444 days in a standoff between America and Iran at that time. And this was during the reign of President Jimmy Carter. And when Ronald Reagan came to power, he did a deal with the Iranians somewhat, and the Israelis got involved in this, and those hostages were released. So this is where the bad blood started from, and the Iranians, of course, have been putting out this rhetoric about, the disdain towards Israel. They've been talking about the Palestinian cause, and the Israelis don't want to hear it. Here's the thing, right, that I noticed: the Iranians have paid the price for trying to defend Palestine, while the Arab countries in the Gulf and beyond, including Jordan, don't care about the Palestinians. Yet the Iranians are the ones that these same people hate, most of them, including some Palestinians in diaspora, including some people in the Middle East. They don't like the Iranians. Well, this doesn't make sense to me. Are you guys really against Israel or are you not? So this is where I really don't understand, and this is the complexity of Middle Eastern politics. So we fast forward, to the Iran-Iraq war in 1980. The U.S. supported Iraq because of the bad blood again between them and Iran after the hostage crisis. So during the Iran-Iraq war, the U.S. provided support to Saddam Hussein's Iraq, while Israel surreptitiously used gave arms to Iran. So this is the same West giving arms to both sides to liquidate each other because, of course, the Israelis don't like Saddam, and the history goes back in time again with Saddam, with the whole um, attack on Israel, particularly on Haifa and Tel Aviv in 1991. And the Iraqis also argued that in 1981 that Israel carried out an attack in Osirak, which is a nuclear facility that was being built by the French and took out a lot of engineers and scientists on site, including French engineers and scientists. The Israelis took them out during that operation. So, of course, we understand the bad blood between Saddam and the Israelis, and also the invasion of Kuwait and the first Gulf War that emanated as the result of that. So, the history goes back in time, particularly understanding the dynamics of the relationship between America, Iran, and Israel. Now let's look at the rising nuclear tension that started especially in the 90s and 2000. Israel started their nuclear program in I think around 55 or in the late 50s. The French were the ones that first gave them the technology, and from there they stole some technology from America. They got some of the warheads that the South Africans had after the collapse of apartheid. So the Israelis have made it very clear that they have the nukes, and they also have this thing in Israel what you call the Samson option, that if push comes to shove, Israel will use the nukes against whoever wants to destroy Israel. So in the 1990s, Iran began building a nuclear program claiming it was for peaceful energy purposes. Israel warned that the nuclear Iran posed an existential threat, and tensions between them rose under the leadership of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. You guys remember him? Fiery figure, very not very tall guy, and yeah, he was the president at I think the early 2010 or 9 or thereabout, and visited. I remember him visiting Lebanon in a place called Bint Ishbel after to commemorate the defeat of the Israelis during the Lebanese Israel war in 2006, where I think that was the last village in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, that they kicked out the Israelis from. So he was in Bint Ishbel. If you remember, I think around 2009 or 2010, I'm not really sure. So the tensions have been rising, particularly under his leadership, and beyond that, Iran have made very clear that they will work towards a civilian nuclear program to back up their energy needs. And Israel have been arguing that, well, you are trying to destroy us, therefore you must not be allowed to do so. And Israel have been carrying out and using other means as well surreptitiously, like cyber warfare and covert operations. Yeah, the first digital attack on Iran was the Stuxnet cyber worm, believed to have been developed by the Americans and Israel, which sabotaged Iran's nuclear centrifuge. And simultaneously, Iran's nuclear scientists were targeted and assassinated in operations attributed to Israel's Mossad. Let's not forget that they used chemicals on them. They targeted some of the scientists and took them out in covert operations in Iran. Let's not forget that Iran is a very big country. In fact, the population of Tehran, which is the capital city of Iran alone, is bigger than the whole of Israel. I think there are about between depending on the number you believe, between 14 to 20 million Iranians that live in Tehran, the capital city alone. So it's a very big country in terms of landmass and in terms of population. And right now, they are going back and forth with the Israelis, and this is what is going on at this point in time. So, from cybernetics, cyber warfare, covert operations that Israelis are carrying out. Now, let's look at the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the JCPOA, which marked the diplomatic breakthrough around 2015. Now, the government at that time of Barack Obama, who was the president of the United States of America, came up with an initiative to stop the Iranian advancement, in terms of enriching their uranium in response in for the Iranians to get some kind of economic relief and the removal of sanction. This happened in 2015, and this was an agreement signed with the P5, the permanent five members of the United Nations Security Council plus Germany. Now, this was an attempt to curb Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. While many global powers welcomed it, Israel strongly condemned it, with the Prime Minister of Israel going to the Congress at that time and talking smack about the US President Barack Obama while he was in office. But at that point, he was already a lame duck, and he was on his way out. So, but the deal went ahead. It was not the best deal, but it was a deal that could stick. And the Israelis said they don't want it. And Trump came on the campaign that he was going to tear up that agreement. He did. And after doing that, the Iranians went back to enrichment of uranium, and that the agreement is not just going to be bound by them alone. So in 2018, President Trump put the US out of the JCPOA and imposed severe sanctions on Iran. Iran resumed uranium enrichment. Then in 2020, a US drone strike killed General Qasem Soleimani, a revered Iranian military commander. I remember this attack very well, that happened around 2020. It wasn't just Qasem Soleimani that was taken out, who was the head of the Al Quds and the second in command of the IRGC or something like that. It was also Abu Mohammed al Mohandis, Abu Mahdi al Mohandis, who was the head at that time of the one of the most powerful militias in Iraq called Kataib Hezbollah, or the Hezbollah Brigades. And then you also have Hadi Al Amri was the operational commander, but he was not among those that was killed. By the way, it's Abu Mahdi Al Mohandis and Hassim Soleimani. They're the top two guys in that vehicle that was targeted and taken out by the Americans, by the American drone. Yeah, so basically, the US have also been going back and forth with the Iranians, and the Iranians responded with missile attacks on the US bases in Iraq. And so this has been coming for a very long time. Now, Israel and Iran, we look at the shadow war and and the proxy battles that they've been fighting. While the tensions are going on politically, and Israel and Iran, some cases, attacking each other surreptitiously using cyber warfare, targeted assassinations and so on and so forth. But there's another side of it, which is the proxy wars that is being fought. Now, while avoiding direct war, Israel and Iran engage through other proxy forces as well. Israel regularly carrying out strikes against Iranian positions in Syria, while Iran arms Hezbollah, recently Hamas, and also the Houthis in Yemen, all seen as proxies of Iran. The conflict have also expanded to include maritime sabotage and drone warfare in the region. So this is a very politically dangerous area, and the Israelis have been upping the ante and making a lot of really difficult statements recently that they were going to attack Iran, and they have followed through on their promise. Now, let's look at the period between 2023 and 2025. Um, the US stepped in after President Trump came to power again. After his first tenure, then Biden came, then President Trump said he's not going to allow Iran to continue with their nuclear program, that Iran is going to pay the price, that if the Iranians refuse to do a deal, that it will be attacked. And the Israelis have made it very clear that they don't even want any kind of deal. The only deal that is acceptable to them is a Libyan style model, meaning that America will go into Iran, inspect the nuclear facilities, and blow them up like they did in Libya in exchange for economic incentive. Well, the Iranians are not going to accept that. They say, well, this is a fight to the finish. We are not going to accept that. While that was going on, Israel was attacking Gaza. You saw the exchanges between Hezbollah and Israel, the attack by the Houthis, blocking the Bab al Mandab, raising the stake in the region. So it has been a very volatile situation. Now, at the end of the day, the Israelis followed through on their promise after negotiations with the Americans failed and Israel attacked Iran. So this is the place we are at this point with them going back and forth. In fact, today it's been said that Israel have attacked the holy city of Mashhad on the border with, I think, in the Afghanistan or Pakistan, which is where the supreme leader have his holiday home. Some believe that he's there, and the Israelis have gone to Mashhad to use bunker busters to blow up his home. At the end of the day, the Americans are also making the argument that if Iran does not surrender unconditionally, that the US will put boots on the ground in Iran. Well, this is dangerous time, guys, and we are seeing clearly that oil prices are going up, and there is a likelihood of broader escalation. The Chinese and the Russians are monitoring and watching what is going on carefully, and the Americans again will have to make the mistake of the war in Afghanistan, 20 years of war in Afghanistan with no end result, with them being kicked out. We are looking at a real possibility of America putting boots on the ground. So, for those of you that are Iranians and supporters of the erstwhile Shah and you're in diaspora calling for an attack on your country and the removal of the Islamic Republic, like you claim, this war might lead to the death of tens of thousands of your countrymen. And this is what I've been preaching against, I've been talking against for the past years. While some people think it's going to be a cakewalk, they're just going to go in and get rid of them. No, it's going to be a bloody battle that will lead to the loss of lives and properties. And at this point in time, I believe that calm heads need to prevail. The people that are really directing this operation from behind the scene is the CIA. America is the one. Trump gave the green light for this attack on Iran.